most likely familiar with the 10 Commandments in the Bible, stuff we generally take as good advice. Don't murder, don't steal, honor your parents, the list goes on.
And those are just the first 10. There are actually a total of 613 commands, all given to ancient Israel, found in the first 5 books of the Bible, which in Hebrew are called the Torah.
Now, the word Torah is usually translated in English as the law, because it has all of these laws in it. And as you read through them, you wonder, am I supposed to obey some of these, all of these? I mean, what's the purpose of the law?
I'm Diego from Guatemala. My question is, how do we determine which laws still apply today and which ones don't? I know some traditions believe that if it's not addressed in the New Testament, it's no longer valid, but I've also found other traditions anchoring on Old Testament laws to explain current church practices. Could you provide some light on this? Thank you.
You know, the 10 Commandments, people love those.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Yeah, for the most part.
For the most part.
Well, the ones about idols and Sabbath.
Yeah.
That's actually a great example because don't murder, don't steal. It feels pretty universal.
Yeah.
But then
Like there hasn't been a time in human history where it's like, well, that was for ancient Israel to not murder. Like today.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So those feel more universal. But then the Sabbath has gotten thoroughly reculturized in many Christian traditions to mean Sunday, rest on Sunday. But of course, that's not what Sabbath means in the Hebrew Bible.
There was a very specific meaning of Sabbath in the 10 Commandments.
Specific way to do it from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown.
Yeah.
Is the Sabbath.
I see.
It's
the 8.5 commandments.
Totally. Here's a provocative way to answer the question, and then one that's more helpful. In terms
just tell me, there's 613. How many of those are still relevant?
Well, what you asked, Diego, is how many of them apply today?
Yeah.
And in one sense, all of them.
Ooh.
And in another sense, none of them.
I mean, what's the purpose of the law?
Well, that translation is kind of confusing because while the Torah has laws in it, the book itself is fundamentally a story about how God is creating new kinds of people who are fully able to love God and love others. And when Jesus taught about the Torah, he said that he was bringing that story to its fulfillment.
So walk me through the story and how it's fulfilled.
So the story begins with God creating humanity who rebels. And God chooses Abraham to bless all of the nations through his family, who end up in slavery down in Egypt, and so God rescues them. Then at Mount Sinai, God makes a covenant with Israel, like an agreement. And all of the laws that Moses gives to Israel are the terms of that agreement. They're like a constitution. And so some of the laws, they're about rituals and customs that set Israel apart from the nations. Other laws are about social justice or morality. And by following these, Israel would show the other nations what God is like. So in one sense, none of the laws apply. Why? 2 ways. One is the laws appear in a narrative of what God revealed to ancient Israelites, an ancient people group on the other side of the planet 2,000 years ago. With a unique culture, history, language, and so on. And I'm not an ancient Israelite. So point is, You're not. I'm not.
Yeah.
And so the vast majority of followers of Jesus around the world today now are not Israelite. There are many Jewish brothers and sisters who follow Jesus Messiah. But in terms of numerical, proportions. So no modern followers of Jesus are the audience spoken to in the giving of the laws. That's one piece. The second piece, though, is a deeper presupposition that many Christian traditions have developed about the Bible that we've called the reference book approach. The Bible is kind of this it's a handbook, like a divine behavior manual. Yep. Yeah. And so
rule book.
Pick a sentence from this part of the Bible, from that part of the Bible, from that part of the Bible, front, back, middle, end, and that's what God says for you to do.
And this is where it gets confusing because ancient Israel, we're talking the time of Moses, and then also beyond, would have had some sort of ancient constitution of laws, and we don't
customs.
have customs. We don't have it. We just have pieces of it.
Yeah. And by say we have, the biblical authors selected.
Yeah, and gave to us.
And inserted into the story.
Yeah.
Different collections of legal material that they believe were a revelation of God's wisdom to his people. The point is just even then,
we don't have Israel's whole legal custom and tradition.
Yeah.
We have samples of it.
Yeah. If you think what you have is an ancient constitution or like the legal handbook, we have pieces of that. We don't even have that.
Yeah.
And so the Bible isn't trying to say, here is exactly how you do everything
Yeah.
to be a good person
Yeah.
as a child of God.
Okay, so the rest of the Torah is just the complete list of laws that Moses gives Israel?
No, the rest of the Torah just continues the story. And the 613 commands are only a selection from that original constitution. And even these have been broken up and placed at strategic points within the story. Now pay attention, because you'll see a really clear pattern. Moses gives the first laws to Israel.
Yeah, don't worship other gods, don't make idols.
And then right after that, there's a story of Israel breaking those very laws.
Yeah, they worship the golden calf.
And so Moses gives some more laws, and then you get more stories of rebellion. Some more laws, rebellion again, some more laws, more rebellion, and you start to see the point.
Right, no matter how many laws, they're just going to continue to rebel.
So at the conclusion of the Torah's story, Moses gives this final speech to Israel as they prepare to go into their new home. And he tells them, you guys, I know that you're not going to follow all of God's laws. You've proven to me that you're incapable. And Moses says the problem is that their hearts are hard and that they're going to need new, transformed hearts if they're ever going to truly follow God's law. And he was right. I mean, the story goes on to recount Israel's total failure.
They go into the land, they break all the laws.
Yeah. So in that sense, none of them, because the purpose of the laws in the Torah isn't to provide the ultimate comprehensive way that God wants you to live as stated in the laws as such. You just don't have what you need, and that's not the role that they play.
But what if I said there, okay, but there's still something there.
Yes.
So why don't I just follow the things that it does have? I mean, I should at least do that. If this is God's word, I should at least try to do the things it does tell me.
So, but this is part of the laws are incarnate. They're embodied in the language and imagery of their culture and time. They're laws that assume a federation of tribal communities living in the hill country of Israel and Judah,
Yeah.
in the Iron Age, in agricultural units. You know what I mean? Like, so most humans of most human history now don't live in the social setting assumed by the laws. So this is the whole thing. So one is a reference book approach to the laws don't really allow anybody who didn't live in the original time they were given, only they could apply them on one level.
Yeah.
So in one sense, none of them apply to anybody. But in another sense, all of them apply. And what we mean by that is the laws fit into a unified story, and they play a role in what the author is trying to communicate about God, God's wisdom, and human nature through the cycles of the biblical story.
Okay, so we have the law and the prophets, and they're telling one connected story about God's desire to bless the whole world through a people, Israel, who it turns out needs a new heart.
Yes, and Jesus saw himself as continuing that story. So he agreed with the law and the prophets when he taught that it's out of the human heart that come the most ugly parts of human nature. It's like the default setting of our hearts is opposed to God's law. But Jesus also said that he came to solve that problem, and in his words, to fulfill the law.
So what does he mean there, to fulfill the law?
Well, first he said that the demand of all of the laws in the Torah could be fulfilled by what he called the Great Command, that we are to love God and to love others.
So that seems pretty easy. I mean, we all want to love.
Well, we think we want to love. But Jesus showed how love is far more demanding than we realize. So he quotes the law, do not murder. And he says, yes, not killing someone is a very loving thing to do. But then he also says that when you treat someone with disrespect or when you nurse resentment against them, you're also violating God's moral ideal because you're not treating that person with love. And so Jesus said true love ought to extend even to our own enemies. So even though this command seems very simple, Jesus showed how our hearts are not currently equipped to fulfill even this basic command of God to love others.
And that's kind of a downer.
So Diego, your question is, there are some traditions that say if a law from the Hebrew Bible isn't quoted or repeated in the New Testament, then it's not valid. So Paul quotes the and the handful of 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
Well, what about the ones that he doesn't quote? Does that mean it's kind of an arbitrary reference book way of doing it? But viewing the Bible as a unified story and that the laws were viewed as a source of wisdom all of a sudden means that all of the laws apply, but in different ways. So, and the reason why Deuteronomy was such a great set of test cases was you can see even how Jesus takes one of the 10 Commandments that's in Deuteronomy, don't murder. So you could just say, well, that applies.
Yeah.
But look at what Jesus does with that command is all of a sudden he turns it into
Don't despise people.
God addressing issues of contempt
Yeah.
and pride, superiority, and anger.
Yeah, it's not so easy as don't take someone's life anymore.
Yeah.
There's some deep wisdom about respecting
Yeah.
humans as being the image of God.
That's right. And so in that sense, what Jesus sees, the divine wisdom in do not murder, I think is the same process that we are called to undergo with all of the 613 laws. Where's the divine wisdom that transcends the particular wording or situation of the law in its ancient setting and that transcends that? And that's what we trace Jesus doing. So I really am not being sarcastic, Diego, when I say, but none of them apply and all of them apply.
Yeah.
None of them apply literally because I'm not an ancient Israelite. However, I am a non-Israelite who follows Israel's Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been grafted into the family story that views these laws and the narratives around them as a source of divine wisdom. And so in that sense, all of them apply.
Israel failed. Jesus brought this story to its fulfillment. As Israel's Messiah, he fully loved God and others, and he showed all of the nations what God is truly like. He did this through his acts of compassion and mercy, and ultimately by loving his enemies even unto death. And after his resurrection, he told his followers that he would send God's Spirit to transform their hearts so that they could follow him and fulfill the purpose of the law, to love God and to love their neighbor. So this fulfills the story of the law and the prophets, or in the words of the Apostle Paul, the one who loves fulfills the law.
So what I discern, and I know that's just from my own experience when I was first learning how to make sense of the Bible, is, and it's yours too, John, this is a conversation we've had for years. There's hundreds of these commands. If I have a reference book, behavior manual view of the Bible exists to tell me in the form of direct instruction what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
You just forget the narrative, just take things from here and there. And that approach will lead to an internally contradictory, inconsistent use of the Bible that produces the kind of diversity and division that are in so many Christian traditions today. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't seem like that's how Jesus and the apostles engaged the laws of the Torah. So different traditions have developed different tools that can be more helpful, less helpful. And so the moral civil ceremonial is a helpful organization for some things, but I don't think it leads us to really see what Jesus and the apostles are doing with the laws.
Cool.
So, yeah, it's a big topic, and it's just good. It's just perpetual. I think it will be ongoing until the new creation.
Hmm.
But it's a dynamic that's right there in the New Testament, and it's important for all of us as we meditate on the laws of the Torah.